Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to be installing the new fuel system on the TTRS, as well as some other goodies that I have. So let me show you what I'm going to be doing. So this is what I'm going to be doing in this video is I'm going to be installing the Redline MotorWorks surge tank setup. So it's a dual E5 LM pumps in the radium surge tank. He has this really nice controller mounting box that goes in the back of the car along with all the wiring that goes to the front of the car. It runs a 6AN line from the pump to the front of the car and then a 6AN line from the surge tank back to the rear of the car that I'm going to have to put a bulkhead fitting into the pump. I'll be showing you guys how this is installed from start to finish. I also got the Tile QRJ blow-off valve. The reason I did that is at the 1,000+ horsepower level, the factory diverter valve starts failing, so I'm hoping that this will help me hold boost a little bit better. So let's get started. So the surge tank sits right here where this auxiliary cooler is. I've already removed the fender liner and the front bumper, and there's 3 bolts that hold this in. There's a nut on the back side of this, and then up here there's 2 more. They're all 13 millimeters. And then what you do is the hose that he provides, you trim it and loop the hose right here. So it's a fairly simple install. And then the bracket for the new surge tank bolts up using the same hardware in the same spots. So I have it off from the frame rail, still attached. And what I'm going to do is trim the legs down on this hose so that way it fits in there nice and snug. And I have a little bucket underneath, and I'm going to try to drain it and get this hose on as quick as possible. So this is now connected, everything's tightened up, and the auxiliary cooler is there with some coolant, so make sure you top it off and re-bleed your coolant afterwards. I would cut one of them about a 1/2 inch to 1 inch shorter, as the top part actually needs to be longer based upon where the hose is going to it. So it bolted up perfectly. He sends 2 extra 13 millimeter nuts to go behind to space this out, and the bracket has a built-in spacer here, and then you just reuse the factory nuts to tighten it back in. Now I'm going to be removing the IROS PTFE line, and I'll be running the line that Brian provided through the factory tunnel where the factory lines are. So now I'm going to modify the factory pump and put the 6AN bulkhead fitting in. To do that, I'm going to cut off the nipple here, and then I'm going to drill it out using a step bit so that way this fits in nice and tight and secure. Tried to cover it up as much as I could inside so that way none of the plastic gets into the pump itself, and I'll show you guys once it's done. Bulkhead fitting is installed. It's a 17 millimeter for this end, and then you put the other washer and the locking nut on this end. The drill bit was a little bit over a 1/2 inch, and you want to make sure that you have everything flat where it seals to. Took a Dremel and made sure everything was very flat because this is the washer that's used. So you want to make sure that it can fit over the hole without being raised up anywhere, so that way it's a nice tight seal. The next part I'll be doing is the wiring. So I moved this part of the styrofoam out of the way, which was right here. So to do that, you have to undo the straps. I popped off the back plastic cover that goes here, which allowed me to move this a little bit out of the way. And now, let me see if I can show you. Down there, there's two little tabs that we need to mount the bracket to that he gives us. And then there's a grommet that I have to find that the wiring goes down through, down into the floorboard and under the car. So I have the wiring all laid out here. This is the lead that will go underneath the car up to the front to the surge tank as well as to the Cyvex unit. This is the ground wire. It gets grounded to the factory ground right here. These are the fuses, and they are for the power, which you just tap off from right here. Then there's a purple wire that goes to the factory fuel pump wiring, and that's what gives the signal to turn on the controllers. He does give a little clip that you can use for the control from the Cyvex. However, I'm going to cut this off and just wire it straight into the Cyvex unit. I have the wiring most of the way finished up in the back of the car, so ground is right there. Two power wires here and here. And the box is installed right there, so it fits really well. Clipped right in place. The wiring goes through the loom behind there. This would be a lot easier on a lift, but I was able to get the wiring through that grommet right there on the left-hand side. And then I zip tied it up the frame rail, over the frame rail there. It comes down by the filler neck. I have it zip tied to the filler neck. And then I run it down by the fuel lines. Zip tied in multiple places near the fuel lines. And then Brian gives these three connectors that I drilled in. I drilled in at spots where I could take a pick and move all of the hoses to the left side, so that way when I drilled through it, it hit any of the hoses. So now that I have those three installed, I have to do everything up through the front, right up here. So that's next. A little tip for when I installed in the rail down here, I used the step bit and just went until it was a snug fit, and it went right through the metal pretty cleanly. I have the wiring mocked up in the fender well. Going to be using some zip ties in some places, and he did send some more of those zip ties that have plugs that can go into a hole. So another thing that I did, I'm not sure if I said in the video, is I taped all of these up at the very beginning, so that way you don't have 6 wires just hanging out. It acts like it's one wire, and it was a lot easier to fish it through all the holes. This is the plastic part that holds in the fuel line and the evap lines that go to the back of the car. And then down through there, you can see the lines, they go into the little tunnel that goes under the car. So this is a little part that holds it in. It holds it in here, and then there's a 10mm nut that is held in right here. You have to loosen up the lines. I broke it simply because I'm not going to use this part anyway. So now what I'll have to do is take a Dremel and create room in it right here, as well as room right here, so that way the 6AN lines have room to go through right here and into the tunnel. And I'll have to do the same thing on the back of the car where they come out of the little tunnel, because there's very similar bracketry that holds it in there. Getting ready to pull the hoses through the tunnel, I popped off the plastic holder that goes on the bottom of the car at the back of the tunnel. I've taped the fuel line, the factory fuel line, to the feed and return. And I've also made sure that the heat protection, I'm not sure exactly what it's called, lines up so that way it gives a little bit of protection from rubbing where it goes down into the tunnel right there. So I'm going to push the fuel line through to the point where I can pull it from the back, and I've taped it in such a way that I'm hoping will allow both those lines to slide right. This didn't end up working, so I had to pull the lines from the back of the car through the front, because the front of that fuel line is too hard to go from the front to the back. I have the lines ran. I have the plastic piece fit back in the best I could. It's a lot between the IROS catch can and the lines. It's 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag. So both the lines, all three of the lines go in through that opening right there. And then you can see you have the return, which is labeled, the supply, which is labeled, and the overflow, which is from the pressure regulator. And then it has the 8AN line from here right to the rail. I do like that the line goes directly to the rail. It makes everything down here look a lot cleaner and a lot easier to manage. I just have to do everything in the tank and get the intake, the inlet manifold installed again for that part. And then after that, I'm going to be installing the diverter valve, or the blow-off valve. So I have to put in the fittings here, and I'm going to make a 4AN line that goes to that. Okay, so some updates. I've got everything in the engine bay finished up. Everything underneath the car almost finished up. I just have to put the belly pan back on the car. And wanted to show you guys what I had to do, how I got the engine bay looking as clean as I can for all the hoses that are in it. And then kind of talk about some problems that I had that have caused some delays. So I reinstalled the inlet, reinstalled the turbo. I still have to install the tray for the turbo. I did get the diverter valve installed. Let's see if I can show you guys what that looks like. It's right there, kind of hard to see, but that's all installed. I ran 4AN line from underneath the manifold to that. Had a couple issues after reinstalling the fuel rail with putting the new fitting on and capping off the fitting that went to the IROS line. I actually tore 2 injectors, reinstalled, injector O-rings, reinstalled 2 of those, put it back on, and ended up with another one that I tore. So I just put all new O-rings across the top. No leaks now. I did have some issues with the IROS fitting. So I'm not sure if you can see very well, but there's 2 O-rings inside there. And on the SRM pump, it was extremely tight, and it ended up tearing 2 of those O-rings, so I had to order 2 new O-rings. But I have that installed. That's right here, so you can see I wanted to use the IROS fitting on the top of the fuel hat, really like that. And then here's the return that's included in the Redline kit. And then Stan remotely connected to me, and while the car was running, I had to adjust the pressure regulator to 6.2 bar of fuel pressure. That's what he wants as the base fuel pressure. So all I have left to do now is install the front bumper again. I did a little bit more trimming just to make it fit better right here. And then install the under tray for the intake, and car should be ready to go. Here's the wiring that I redid to make it kind of look like it was back to stock. Just have the one wire here that goes to the controllers that turns those on. But beyond that, it looks fairly stock, except for there's 2 fuel fittings. Back of the car is put back together. Front of the car is together. And let's see if you can even see it back here. So there's the surge tank. Took me a little bit longer than I wanted to get this done, but I wanted to do it right and I wanted to take my time. So now I'm just gonna work with Stan to get the car tuned, and hopefully we can make this baby fast. If you can, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Thanks guys, have a great day.